Okay, good morning. We are discussing the divine unity, Achdus Echad, as it's explained in Toras Sholom by the Rebbe Rashab. And this is to come to understand better what the Rebbe Rashab explained at the conclusion of Ayin Beis, as we have it, the manuscript where the Rebbe Rashab stopped writing. But the main theme, which we shall get back to shortly, is understanding the divine unity, beginning especially on page 1466, where he said that in order to understand how we can transform the animal soul, v'haftas Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha, b'shnei yitzirecha, that both sides of the heart, the right and left side, meaning both the divine soul and also the animal soul, should love God. So you come to that through Shema Yisrael and Baruch Shem, which is the contemplation and the emotional reaction, the emotional birthing of feelings of love and reverence to God, that in turn impacts the Vahafta. So it's the Shema Yisrael, the Bonus on Achdus Hashem. In other words, when we live in this world on our own, if we don't do anything, we live a life what's called surviving, existing, taking care of our needs, even if a person behaves in an appropriate way. But this world, as we of course know, the divine is concealed. So we need the effort, firstly, the cognitive effort of hisbonenus and contemplation to be aware that there's a creator within existence that created it all. And then understanding the different levels of this creator, as we've been discussing both in Ayin Beis and in Toras Sholom here. You go mamata l'mayla. You work your way up. That's the yichud mamata l'mayla, the Avodah mamata l'mayla. You begin with creation, with the yesh lamata, below. And you come to discover there's a creator. And there's a creative energy that creates existence. Then you come to realize that's just a reflection. And there's a higher level called sevev kalam, transcendent. That is a form of mufla and muvdal. In other words, you're not focusing only on how the creator is creating existence, but the creator itself is of a different caliber. And then there's mufla be'etzem, Atzmus ein sof, which, as we learned, is already the highest. We're talking mamatla maila now. And there you don't quite, because it's coming through our tools and our efforts, like you said, when you climb, there's all kinds of impediments, and you need energy, you need tools, and everything's commensurate to your avodah. So like he explained, that's why you don't fully comprehend and get to the bottom of understanding exactly how existence is encompassed within the divine, even though it makes total sense, because we're coming from the perspective of existence. Then comes the yichud mamayel lamata and the avodah mamayel lamata. And this avodah is you're beginning with a different point of departure. The point of departure is now Atzmus. Atzmus is reality. Existence is the superimposed reality. We're not beginning from the bottom up, top down. Atzmus, or sometimes Chassidus uses the language, Elikus b'pshitas. Elikus is a given. And Elam is b'yischatzus. And existence is the novelty. L'matla ma'ila, existence is the given. And Elikus is the novelty. Meaning something we have to reach for and aspire to and long for and discover. Here you're beginning with a very different perspective. Atzmus is ours, and every is the reality, and that defines and creates all of reality. And he is really the essence of all reality. Like we learned that it's a piece of wood, but it's not a piece of wood from that perspective of Atzmus. And that's the yichud. And Avodah, it's understanding that God is within every detail and fiber of existence. Lamato like Lamaila. There's no distinction. Because by Atzmus, there's no difference between small or big. Okay. And then it's Nogayeh to him, like we learned. It's Nogayeh. He wants this. He cares about it. And at the same time, he's not defined by it. That's what makes Atzmus. That's part of the, I don't want to use the word hafla because he didn't use it Amamayla Lamata, he only used it Amamata Lamaila. And we're going to understand why as well. Because there, we're trying to understand the superiority of God compared to existence. Here, that's a given. You don't need to explain that. That's a given. Atzmus is the only reality. Now we have to understand how that Atzmus is manifest within our existence. So he's saying he's in every fiber of existence, watches us closely, cares about what we do. He said the words, I want to just repeat it because it's very powerful. He says that, I'm reading on page 201, he says, it bothers him greatly, or he cares greatly, that when a person stumbles, every detail. That's in the negative. Obviously, he cares also on the positive. To the point that even negative things can be transformed into merits, like he said. Okay. So, Atzmus, and we know with who we're dealing now. In other words, our existence now is all an Atzmus expression, basically. So when you know that, he says, then you're careful in every detail of your life, even a dover kal, even a small little thing. You know, when you know that someone loves you deeply, they care about every detail, you're going to be more careful how you behave. I remember once I knew a guy who used to come to my classes. He was what we would call a swinging single. And he liked his single life. He said he didn't want to be obligated to someone. He didn't want to be committed to anyone. He didn't want anyone sitting and worrying about him. And he has to answer to, where were you, and so on. And that's it. He was playing, that was the life he was living. Years later, I mean, obviously people mature and they grow. I remember after a few classes, he came over to me once and he said, obviously something was touching him. He was kept from coming to the classes, and I wasn't exactly advocating a type of what do we call it? A happy-go-lucky freestyle life, And he said to me that he's planning to get married. And I know him. We speak quite often, and he said to me that once what he considered to be like just a burden, that somebody that he has to answer to so on and so on, he says it's changed everything. At some point he came to realize it's a very lonely life. He can do whatever he wants, yes, but nobody cares. He says, I have a wife. And when I come home late from work, she calls me and says, where are you? It's not badgering me. On the contrary, there's someone on earth that cares about me. And it's changed my whole life. I behave differently because someone cares. It's just a very a moment that I just remember. So we learn from this. So God cares about every detail. So you're going to be very careful. When you're carefree and you say, who really cares? I don't care. You become very loose. So he's saying, and that's why a person is nizar in alt skam bedover akal. It's not a dover kal. From the point of view, the one that cares, that's Nogayeh Atzmus. It's Nogayeh to Atzmus, so it's not a small matter. He cares, and it's Atzmus that cares. And Atzmus is not someone that needs anything. So that he should care about every detail, and the person contemplates on that. That is Mamay Lamata, where he is careful in every detail. So it's a very different type of Avodah. This does not negate at all, as I pointed out, the Mamata Lamayla approach. Both are necessary, and that's why we have both, and both ultimately get connected as well. But now he's talking about Mamay Lamata. To continue the summation, then he said that this is also what the Mittler Rebbe said, why tzaddikim g'delim, great tzaddikim, say Ashamnu, vidui, confession basically, on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. They don't have any sins. So he says, because the din and mishpat of Rosh Hashanah is not coming from Bezin Shalmaila. It's not coming from Giluyim. It's not coming from a level of Seder Shtalshus. Seder Shtalshus is a tzaddikim. Hashem is Atzilus, whatever. But here the din mishpat is coming from Atzmus. Use the words he says here. The Atzmus saying so. Shalagaba Atzmus kol nechshavim kechetim apeshim. Everybody is incomplete. Everybody is considered like a sinner. He doesn't mean a sinner, actual sinner, because we're talking about tzaddikim dalim. But we're talking about once you speak from the perspective of Atzmus, everything changes. It's a different reality completely. And I explained how tzaddik ain't tzaddik, but it's ashiyasa tevela yechta. And especially there's no tzaddik on earth. The pasuk says that does well, does good, and does not have any chechta. So Chassidus explains what's the yechta, what's the sin by a tzaddik gomer. Tanya says there's the whole nefesh habamis has been transformed. Even a Beinoni doesn't do a sin. So the answer is chet from the word chesed. It's not complete, especially as long as we're in Golos. There's no such thing as being absolute perfection. It's not complete. You haven't done as much as you could have done. And then the language of the Gemara, it says 3 people died, not because of sin, because itya shel nachash. That's the only reason. Because of the conspiracy of the serpent, meaning the chet eitzadas. So with the chet eitzadas, polluted existence, so everybody's affected by it, even if they didn't directly do anything wrong. There's 2 levels in that as well, but I'm not going to go into that right now. So bottom line is nimtzas is Nogayeh and Atzmus. And nevertheless, God is not defined by it. Put it in more poetic terms, God defines everything, but he's not defined by anything. You can say the word, it does not contain by it. It's not affected, even though he cares. We discussed this, I don't want to go over it again right now. But I do want to talk about for a moment the next line. Very briefly, he said, as Atzmus bet Nitfes in them, oi, or shazeu gufa hu b'chinas Atzmus. Or that guf is Atzmus. What does this mean exactly? And this also explains what he said in the first comment that I said, I need to think about it more, because he was saying that this concept of Avodah Mamaylamata adds explanation, Gitzu Verstand, in what we discussed before on page 199 about Achdus, about Yichud Mamaylamata. So here we were saying it's Nogayeh to Atzmus, but it's not contained or defined by it or touched by it, if you wish. Touched, I don't mean by touched as in caring, but touched meaning Nitfes. He's not grasped by it. He's not grasped by it. But now he says, earlier he said it is like Mokim Arnein Amida. Like he said, it's Mokim, but it's not Mokim. It's the tree, it's like the wood, but it's not the wood. It's Atzmus. So I was wondering, what does that mean? When he said before, yes, Norvide is a dos guf is Atzmus, which means that guf is Atzmus is even higher than Mokim Arnein Min Amida. So these last 2 lines comes to clarify that, even though he doesn't explain it, but I will try to explain it a bit. He's basically saying there's 2 ways to look. We're talking about Maila Lamata now. Mamata Lamaila, existence and its Tzimtzum and everything is encompassed. There's a power of Atzmus. Like he said, Kol Batzmuse. It's not Atzmus, it's Kol Batzmuse. Because we're working our way from the bottom up, and all of it is encompassed, like the art is encompassed within the artist. They're one, it's a yichud, but it's Mamata Lamaila. Here we're talking the complete opposite direction. Every Atzmus is the beginning point of departure. And Atzmus is everything. What we have to understand is, what is this everything? Is everything exist or doesn't exist? In the Mata L'Mayla, we don't ask that question. Because Mata L'Mayla, you never began with the premise that nothing exists except God. You're beginning that there's an existence. The existence has Mamala Kalam, the divine energy within existence. Then Sevav Kalam, transcendent. Then Atzmus Ein Sof, which is beyond that, Muflim and Sadatzme, as we discussed there. Here, you're beginning with the whole thing is a different approach. There, for example, V'yadaita Yem V'shavesa Levecha, Havayu Elikim, that's all Mamat L'Mayla, and that's why Einoid, like you said, B'Shamayim Mal V'Aretz Amtachas Einoid, there's a Shamayim, there's a Eretz. Now you're beginning with Mayla Lamata, so Atzmus. The question is now, what do you do with existence? Does it exist, does it not exist? So in Mamat L'Mayla, the answer was, what do you mean? Shem Elikim. God created existence. Havayu Elikim. Elikim is a real thing. And from there, you come to understand the Koyach of Elikim and Tzimtzum is all encompassed. Now we're talking, Atzmus is everything. We're not even saying Havayu Elikim. Now we're saying Atzmus is everything. So what do you do with existence? So in the Yichud discussion on page 199, he said, Atzmus is everything. And he's not Nitfes in it, like he said, tough is bay, relate tough is then. It is alts. Like he said, that there is the wood, but the wood is Atzmus. And he gave the example of you measure it, it had to occupy space. But at the same time, it doesn't occupy space. Like all the language that he used there. But now he's adding that itself can be understood in two ways. One is you say it exists. However, it does not define Atzmus. So from the perspective of Atzmus, it exists. Atzmus is the essence of it all, but it doesn't define Atzmus. Then he says more, that Zeu Gufahu B'chinas Atzmus, that itself is Atzmus. So it sounds like a subtle difference, but if you think about it, there's a major difference here. When you say that it's not Nitfes, it means that there's something there. Because why would you have to negate and say it's not defining him? If it's him, of course it doesn't. Then you don't need to qualify anything. In other words, even from a mile lamata, you could speak about Atzmus. Atzmus creates it all, and it's negated to him. He cares, but he's not defined by it. He's not contained by it. He can't grasp by it. The different ways we translate it, but the existence is there. When you say dos guf is Atzmus, you're saying something far, far deeper. You're saying the Avodah that we do, that's negated to Atzmus, it's not even a question whether Nitfes or not Nitfes. That itself is Atzmus. Once it's Atzmus, you don't have to qualify anything. Because you're talking about something that doesn't define him. It's him himself. So when he said earlier that Atzmus is existence, and that there is eitz, but it's not eitz, so in Mokum Ornenim in Amida, you could also say two ways to say. Mokum Ornenim, there's a Mokum, but the Mokum is not Nitfes, it doesn't define him, and that's why it doesn't occupy space. Or you could say the whole thing is Atzmus, and you don't have to say it doesn't occupy space. Altogether, it's altogether one seamless unity, and therefore does not need any qualifications. That's how I understand these two things that he's saying now. The thing is that it's so short, he just says it, that would be obviously far, far better if the Rebbe Rashab had spelled out what he means. I have to look if any of the Chassidim, if anywhere anyone ever wrote anything about this, trying to understand the oi. Because he does say oi, or. If he didn't say or, you could say he's talking about the same thing in two different aspects of it. But because he says oi, to me it's clear. That's why he said before that it's not al derech makamar nemin amida. But we need to understand this better, because remember, this all comes when he's speaking Avodah. By the Yichud, he only spoke, like he said, he only spoke about the truth is he also spoke that it's not Nitfes, and that itself is Atzmus. That's the truth. He just didn't say it as two things. Here he's saying it like two things. So I'm wondering whether the Avodah of a person is more Nogayeh to Hashem than, let's say, just a piece of wood. A piece of wood, you could say, we're not talking about Nogayeh. He created it, but since it's Atzmus, so it's one with Atzmus. You're talking about Avodah, it's Nogayeh. The word Nogayeh means he cares. Obviously he also cares about the wood, but it's not the same thing. He's not caring about the person's behavior as... So I need to really think about that more and something to discuss. I don't want... the real point of learning Toras Sholom is to get us to Ayin Beis, back to Ayin Beis. So there's much more to discuss, and I'm sure it's going to come up as we go back to the initial themes, and we'll see how it all fits in together. But I just wanted to add that explanation. Atzmus vet nitfes, oishu zeu gufu b'chinas Atzmus.
The wood is a piece.
We'll give it some more thought as well. Sorry?
The wood is Nogayeh to him, because this is part of preparing the Avodah of the human being.
If you speak that way, yeah. But before he was just talking about the creation of the wood, the existence of the wood. And once you connect everything to Avodah, yes, correct. Everything is all conflated. Yeah, correct. In other words, the wood, as a person uses it to do a mitzvah with it, or something of that nature, not just the existence of the wood. But remember, there he was talking about existence. The very existence of the wood is Atzmus, even without the consideration that it's going to be used for a mitzvah or for some avodah. Okay.
The whole creation was the person should be able to serve Hashem.
Yeah, but he's not talking. He doesn't say that. When he talks about the Yichum Amayil Mati, he doesn't say it's connected to Avodah Hashem. He says Atzmus, everything is Atzmus. That's Yichud. The mere fact that something exists cannot be outside of Atzmus. Period.
Did you mean Lamayla Lamata?
We're talking only Lamayil Lamata now.
Yeah, I think maybe I misheard, but I thought you said Lamata Lamayla accidentally. I may have misheard you. Sorry.
So the very fact that there's a creation, Atzmus is Alts. We're not even talking about Avodah. Avodah is a whole other story, because Avodah is the Kavanas Atzmus, why he did it all. So obviously that is, but it's a really other discussion. I don't want to go now in difference between the Shamas and existence and what's created for what. That's a whole other part of it, which we will talk about. I'm just saying right now I don't want to discuss. We'll talk about it because it's Nogayeh to the whole idea what Neshamas Yisrael do and whether they need Torah mitzvahs or not. Remember, Riyah. In this world, we need to be able to see. We need Yisiyua, and Torah mitzvahs provides that Siyua. And Torah also provides the light. He also said earlier that Malmata L'mayla, Torah is the handle that allows tzaddikim gedolim, even when they lose their faculties, they suspend their faculties and their senses to hold on to something. So there's more to be said. Toras Sholom, remember, came to discuss this specific thing about mitzvahs. The truth is, I began teaching it from the middle. I went back to the beginning because part of what we're learning here is actually what we learned in the beginning of the Sikha could be very helpful as well. I decided to go straight to the Yichud part. But he did speak in the beginning what means Atzmus exactly, and that can also help understand this. Maybe I'll refer to it shortly when we finish learning this.
The distinction that you seem to be making between Hisavos and Avodah, I can understand that if it's in the question of relationship to Tofes, Nogayeh and Nitfes. But as far as because if you say Avodah could be a Nitfes because it could affect God, or it could be our Avodah could change. We've learned earlier in Ayin Beis that we can actually add God to godliness, so to speak, through our Avodah. But my question here is, but in relationship to whether it's a davar atzmo, or if it's part of Atzmus itself, or it's something that's connecting to Atzmus, you would think that even Avodah, the question still is on Avodah also. It's meaning that my shaking a lulav, is it me really shaking a lulav? Or is it just Atzmus, Atzmus shaking a lulav? It's still a question of, is there somebody, even when you look at it from a Avodah perspective, and milayla lamata, there's still a question of whether there's me and God, or is it only godliness? Even Avodah and even Hisavos, I would think.
I'm not sure. What are you're asking something?
I'm asking.
What's your question?
There seems to be a distinction being made between Hisavos and Avodah. As far
there's no question that the Savas you mean as creation, right?
Yes, just creation without an Avodah.
The Rebbe Rashab made this distinction in exactly those words. On page 1471, right. He said exactly those words. There's Maisa Tachtenim, Ba'avedosam, B'kiyum Torah mitzvahs, Aval Be'inyan Hayisavas, Ein Shum Shin. So I just brought that in. The Rebbe Rashab here alludes to it a bit, but it's two separate things. It is two separate things. But how does that? The same question is going to apply to both. If Atzmus is everything, we have to understand what that everything is. Existence. What is existence? Whether it's a piece of wood, just that was created, a tree, or it's a mitzvah, it all requires an entity. You need an object, you need a human being, free will, and all that. So Mamayla Lamata, he's saying that when you think of it from the Atzmus perspective, not getting now into free will. We obviously have to have free will. That's a given. That's not a discussion even here. That's not relevant right now. Even though you may ask the question, where's there room for free will if Atzmus is everything? The answer to that is that Atzmus, who's everything, gave us that gave us that gift, gave us that opportunity. It's not our own strength. It's his strength that he gave us. He wants us to choose. Fine. But the point is there is an existence But the existence is either, it is Atzmus, like he said. For as far as Avodah goes, Atzmus is within everything and cares about everything. So why is it Atzmus? Because Atzmus, it's not Nitfes in it. He's not defined by it. That's the basic explanation that we learned. But then he added, there's another dimension to say that Atzmus, Zer Gufa hu b'chinas Atzmus. That Gufa is Atzmus, so you don't have to even make that qualification that he's not defined by it, because that itself is Atzmus. Now, as I said, you're going to have to learn and study and exert and work hard to wrap your head around this, because you're talking from the point of view of Atzmus. You're talking about the point of view from us. Remember, there's Mamat L'mayla is also real. Shem Elikim is real. The Tzimtzum is real. Atzmus, the Tzimtzum is only from Mat L'mayla, only his power, or it itself is Atzmus. When you're talking from Atzmus' point of view, it's a very different perspective than from our point of view. So you have to first distinguish who you want to talk, which perspective. If you're talking from the perspective of Atzmus, then the truth of the matter is, the only difference in Esavos and Avodah would be that Avodah is what God wants. He doesn't want to create just a tree and wood. He wants it to be used to be aligned with godliness. That's the only real difference. As far as its existence goes, they're both either not defining Atzmus or are Atzmus itself. But I don't want to go, as I said right now, into the difference of the details between creation before Avodah and after Avodah and Avodah. That we'll talk about when we get back to Ayin Beis, because that's not really what he's coming to address here. I brought it because since we're learning Ayin Beis, and I want to connect the two. So I don't know if you still have a question or not. If you do, please spell it out.
It seems like from Milamayla Lamata, there's nothing have to be. Everything's Atzmus, Whereas if you go from Milamata Lamayla, it seems like we're starting. The starting point is the other. It's the it's
of course exactly.
So that's the whole point. So my question is that from me, that's why maybe the Rebbe smiled when he said it. From Atzmus perspective, it's easier to understand because you're starting from
exactly. Because there's also no rules. Once there's no rules, then everything is understandable.
So from Milamata Lamaila, you have to do something to connect.
Are you asking me from the point of view of Lamayla Lamata, how does God see us when we shake a lulav? Is that what you're asking?
No, I would assume that. Yeah, I guess so. I guess that's really one of the aspect of the question is it Eliezer shaking a Jew doing a mitzvah down here, or just Atzmus?
So I just said that's the question. I can tell you how I understand it. How I understand it may not be the way you understand it, but you're going to need to work hard because you're talking about now, as I said yesterday, you need to spend a long part of your life figuring out Mamata Lamaila. That alone is difficult to do before you get to Mamayla Lamata. It's not an easy thing. If you think what I'm going to say now is going to be easy to understand, I tell you right now, it's not. The way I understand it is like this, that after you work hard of understanding how Mamala Kalalman sees you shaking a lulav, and then how Sevav Kalalman sees you shaking a lulav, and how Atzmus Ein Sof Mamata Lamaila sees how you shake a lulav, once you work that through, and that itself are 3 steps that can also take years, then you come to a certain type of, I would say, awareness, an epiphany, where you think very differently. Your mind is wired completely differently. You're not wired anymore into thinking, how do I make sense of this? How do I not make sense? It becomes like you're looking through the eyes of the Creator now. And how Atzmus sees it, we will never fully know, because we're not Atzmus. We just won't know it. What we can do is imagine, and we can imagine that Atzmus, within his own reality, something is taking place that does not change anything, but he cares about it. So his desire for Dir B'Tachtenim, from his perspective, is he cares about it. We don't understand what means he cares. Because when we care about our families and our children and things in this world, we're Nitfes in it. We're defined by it. Yeah. As simple as that, because we're defined creatures. Our existence is all about manifestations. How does a non-manifest entity A mitzvah is built in mitzvah nimtza. An existence that is a non-existential existence, that is not defined by existence as we know it. It's not defined because it's here. We don't even say he's here, because that already means he manifests in some way. And it's yusim atzmuse, that he's an existence that has no cause. Everything in existence has a cause. And he's beyond finite and beyond infinite. He must exist. How that type of existence should care about you, Sheikh Lulav, you're completely understandable that it's not understandable, and it's no problem, because the paradox is only from the point of view of Mamat L'Mayla, when you still see yourself as a entity. Once you're looking from the eyes of Atzmus, there's no need for this question doesn't exist. And you're completely at peace with it. You know why? Because you worked through the Mamat L'Mayla for years, Ma'amala Seviv and Atzmus. Now you're looking completely from a different point of view. It's like trying to explain a 5-year-old what a mature 40-year-old knows. Tell me if you think you can ever explain it. It's not about seichel. It's something that happens as we mature and we experience certain things. You're just aware of that as a fact that you will never be able to communicate to a child. You'll never be able to communicate certain things. That's just, explain that. There's no real way to explain it. You could write 1 million books and you won't explain it, because it's just two different quality. I'm saying even humans, it's that way. Even ourselves. How were we when we were 10, 15, and now how you are now? So there are commonalities. Obviously, you're the same person, but your awareness is not even the same league. It's so qualitatively different. Imagine now infinite times more Atzmus compared to existence. So we have to say there's something, and that's what he's saying. Just know that this Atzmus, that is a completely different reality, cares about you, Sheikh Lulav, cares about every little detail you're doing. That's all you need to know. That alone is the Avodah. That's the Avodah Mamayla Lamata. You're not going to go and figure out exactly the logic, because logic is already a Mamat Lamayla experience. It's not a Mamayla Lamata experience. That doesn't mean it's irrational. It just means that logic stops at a certain point. And this doesn't mean Amunah. He made it clear. This makes total sense. It makes total sense that Atzmus should be in that type of state, so to speak. Whereas Mamat L'Mayla, it's all about us through our tools trying to figure it out. But you can't come to Mamayla Lamata really if you don't have a Mamat L'Mayla. That I'm ready to say. He doesn't say it in Toras Sholom actually, but to me it's a very clear, and from everywhere in Chassidus, that's critical. That doesn't mean you can't read it, and doesn't mean you can't discuss it. But to really deeply appreciate it, it's hard for me to imagine if someone doesn't understand Atzmus through your seichel, you're not going to understand Atzmus beyond your seichel. So what he said before, you need a munah and from Mamat L'Mayla, because we're going with all those tools. When you're going Mamayla L'Mata, he says that we understand. The smile is because the understanding of it is not necessarily seichel, but it's also not a munah. It's just a total resonating reality. It's like you hear the music, you don't have to explain it, but you just know it's real. And it's not based on faith. It's based on a deep resonating experience. So I don't know if that helps or not.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, to see it through the eyes of Atzmus, we get Oisius. Chassidus talks about it like we're talking about it here, but you need to work on really integrating that level, that perspective. Let's put it that way.
But that perspective, which the Yechido law and what we've been talking about, is to me in the last volume here of volume 3 has been the real tremendous chiddush to me, because what it's basically saying, one of the operating questions you've always said it from Ayin Beis is transforming the tzimtzum. And yet, once you look at from Atzmus perspective, milamayla lamata, there's no concealment. That's what was a chiddush to me. Once you look at it from there, there's
also no concealment.
No concealment, Elokim.
And he said clearly, it does not conceal it because it's just God's power. It's not a concealer. He said that clearly. Even
but that's from
it's not concealment.
Isn't that power of Elokim being a power of Atzmus itself, that Elokim and Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, this transcendent and eliminating one, is from out of Milamayla Lamata, is the same, right? It's the same it's kokos, different kokos, but
he
it's from
said clearly
itself.
Lamata Lamayla that Tzimtzum also doesn't conceal. Just be aware.
Milamata Lamaila?
Yeah.
Oh.
Here, look, read. Look at top of first column on page 198.
I thought that was the whole thing that we have to transform.
I told you you're going to have to learn it at least 100
Okay.
times, my friend.
I got you. Okay.
I know you thought, but it's not. Read line 6. It's talking about mata l'mayla there, not momayla mata.
98. Okay.
Even though it's real, but from the point of view of the one that's concealing, does the teacher, when he conceals what he's teaching to a student, does it concealed from him?
No.
That's mata l'mayla.
I thought that was Milamila from his perspective. It's not concealment.
No, because what you're understanding Atzmus mata l'mayla is itself something that requires a lot of work.
Okay.
That's my point. We're talking about Atzmus mata l'mayla. You're coming to understand Atzmus mata l'mayla.
Fine. Okay.
When it comes to, if you want a mamayla mata, these are the words that he uses. Mamayla mata. Has to gufa b'chinas Atzmus, not just kol ba'atzmus. I explained what that meant. That's somewhat in Ayin Beis when he said Ayin that the symptom itself is Atzmus. The symptom itself is Elikus. Not just the b'shvil. It's not just that it will bring to revelation. It's not just that it leads. Elokim leads to Avaya. That itself is a power of God. But the truth is, even Mamat L'mayla is also somewhat in that level. But I don't want to go there right now. Any other questions? I'm glad you're struggling with this. Like I said, it's a good sign, because that's how you're going to get to understand it.
Yeah, I was thinking all night long about Noga, it's Nogayeh, but no lo Nitfes. That whole idea. It keeps coming back to me when the Rebbe said to Zalman Garari, lo paga v'lo naga. I mean, I don't know. Obviously, it's different context, but I was just
That's the exact opposite context.
The exact opposite.
There is that everything I said, no one heard it, no one was touched by it, and no one was moved by it. It's like people are indifferent. That was more the opposite, Here it's Nogayeh, but it's not Nitfes. It's very different, very different.
Right, it's different. But what's poga mean there? Is there a difference between poga and noga?
Poga means like to be. Actually, poga means to be wounded. There, right. Poga means nobody was touched and nobody was. It was punctured. I don't know, something like that.
It's a deeper level. Paga means
pierced.
deeper.
Nobody was pierced.
So Pagaya would be deeper than Nogayeh.
In that sense, yeah. It's an expression, le noga v'le paga. Le noga means, someone.
I think the expression is
someone cries their heart out. Someone cries their heart out, and then everybody looks at them and they yawn. Didn't touch them. It didn't affect them. It's an expression. What did you say, Rab Shleimer?
I think the expression is loy poga veloy noga. First is poga, and even loy noga.
Okay, it could be momayl lamata or mamat lamata, yeah. But it's not completely not Nogayeh here. Completely not Nogayeh here.
Yeah, but Jacobson.
Sure.
I think if you're gonna have in mind what many times you mentioned in the show, when we try to put a map road, Chiles is here, Brias is here, and we are on the wrong side. The same thing when you try to talk about the Lakus, so a kid is going to say, God is Superman. Someone else would say, God is a powerful whatever. But once you define a Lakus, you're out of business. You can't, the word defining and a Lakus doesn't work together. So when we try to break our head, from a Lakus, first, you have to know what a Lakus is. Take him out from any definition. Then you could go to the next step.
That's correct. Very true. That's exactly why it takes a lot of work, because we are defined materialistic creatures, and it takes a lot of work to come to understand something, even mamata l'mayla, that is beyond our natural parameters. Can someone here explain to me what existed before Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim v'sa'aretz, when we know that time itself was created, so there was no before? How do you explain no before creation? Can someone find what Aces how to explain that? It requires.
If somebody finds ACS, he's already wrong. Because the word before means there is before or after. The definition is there's no such thing as before. It's a language that we don't have. We don't have the tools to measure with it. We look at
but we are such,
eyes.
but because we're creatures of seichel, we get frustrated when we hear that, because we say, 1 second, I want to try to understand. That's why, just to use an example from quantum mechanics, if you read the physicists, when they first started discovering and proving certain the indeterminism and other bizarre conclusions in quantum mechanics, that was all people said, it's impossible. There's no way that this is possible. They kept saying that time and again. And anyone that begins to read it and understand and starts reading what it means says, it's not possible. It's not possible that something exists and doesn't exist at the same time, or it's not defined until you watch it and observe it, and so on. Till they came to realize, maybe you should stop thinking and stop being so worshiping your natural way of understanding things. Maybe you have to develop new ways of understanding. Maybe you have to use different tools. It would be just like a machine, a computer, or a brain trying to understand love. It's insanity what people will do in the name of love. And the very love doesn't even make sense. For many, a computer, you can program a computer today. You have AI, but there are things that need other tools that are not just pure logic and mathematical deductions. It just doesn't work in certain areas. The example I always give from Sir Arthur Eddington's analogy with the fisherman that captured all these different fish and started documenting species and colors and shapes and sizes. And after long research, she came to the conclusion there are no fish in the sea that are shorter than a half-inch long. Okay, until his little daughter said to him, what do you mean? In our fish tank, we have goldfish that are shorter than a half-inch. And they came to realize the net that he used had spaces of half-inch spaces. So, of course, all the fish that were smaller than that fell back into the water. So what he was trying to point out, what tools are you using? If you're going to try and say, love exists, I want to put it under a microscope and I'm going to find it. You're never going to find it with those tools. You need different tools. He was trying to explain that the bizarre conclusions of quantum mechanics, regular tools of Newtonian physics, of the logical billiard ball effect, of cause and effect, don't apply. You need new rules. Or you need rules that are not defined by the rules that we think are rules. So this is all areas that are I'm talking science even. I'm not talking about faith. So when you're talking about Atzmus, you're talking even far, far beyond that, where even the quantum rules don't apply. It's altogether a non-existence. The question is, do we have access to it? That's why I want to tell you, Eliezer, everybody here. That's why there were many Jewish thinkers, brilliant thinkers, that said, this is beyond us. Don't even try going there. What Atzmus is thinking when we do a mitzvah, forget about it. Yes, we'll know whatever he tells us. It gives him nachas ruach. But what does that mean exactly? He has pleasure, and before that he didn't have. We all know as parents what nachas means. But how does it mean by God? So some said these are all metaphors, and don't try to go there. The Rambam was a big one like that. Hu amada, hu yedei, hu yedua. We beyond that, we can't figure it out. We don't know God's way of knowing things. So, but Chassidus, as I said, is a child that wants all of its father. We want to know Atzmus as much as possible. And therefore, the Alter Rebbe and all the Rabbeim afterwards went for a journey far, far farther than anyone ever went. They want to go into Atzmus and understand Atzmus from Atzmus' point of view as much as one can. So you need to know that. That's exactly the reason that no one ever understood how God looks at us when we shake a lulav. We know if you want to speak about God in Atzilus, Elikus and Atzilus, that he has nachas, that it adds eirus, that you mamshech eirish, you fulfill the kavanah, Okay, so we're using God as a moshel, a melech who's happy with his subjects, a father who's happy with his children, a shepherd who's happy with his sheep. There's all kinds of metaphors that we use for God to relate to us. But those are all ultimately mamala kalam and sevav kalam. And Chassidus does take us for a journey to far, far beyond, but you have to be ready to change a lot within you to be able to appreciate that level, because you don't just go there with the same tools. You have to look with a different net and with a different set of eyes. But each of us has to do that individually as we are capable in the level where we're at.
I was speaking about tools.
People have told me, by the way, just one more thing. I've been told, Mashpiyim and others, they hear my shiurim, and they said, why are you teaching this stuff to people who have not learned for 40 years Chassidus? Not criticizing you guys per se. They say that you're teaching the deepest aspects. A lot of people will not learn this, not because it's off limits, because they don't feel it could be appreciated by someone who hasn't learned some of the basics in Torah, L'kutei Torah, and Derech Mitzvah. And it may be true that it's harder to appreciate. I still feel it's time to do it, because first of all, the Rebbe said Mashiach is right here, so if not now, when? Second of all, I'm being a little selfish. I want to learn it, and I need an audience. So here you are. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say, as far as tools go, the subatomic particles, molecules, we needed a microscope, an electronic microscope. We needed actual tools that never existed prior to be able to reveal those truths to us. Correct. Yeah. So my question to you is, I've often thought about—
One second, but there's no microscope that can see a subatomic particle.
I did read where they are able to measure it with they did take a picture recently of a subatomic particle. And I think it was in the quarks, or with that new place down where in Europe. I
would argue that it's not a picture. It's an estimate.
All right, but
let's start with things you can't. Can you take a picture of love?
Just take a picture of atom, just an atom. We know
that. No, love. Can you take a picture of love? Love, LOVE.
Yes. No.
But it exists.
So that's my question. That in the physical world,
do limited tools define existence?
My question is this: we do have tools that have enabled us to reveal some of the deepest secrets in science that would never be able to reveal before, because of these specific tools that are real. My question to you is that do we assume that the tool of trying to reveal Atzmus is Chassidus, the learned teaching of Chassidus, that's the ultimate tool? Or have I often thought that we're missing the biggest tool to reveal Atzmus in the world, which is the Beis Hamikdash? The Beis Hamikdash was an actual, I look at it as like a transmitter. It will transmit godliness into this world. Like, if you don't have a radio transmitter, there's radio waves in your room, but you will never have it revealed. You need a radio to reveal that, or a transmitter to transmit that. I was wondering, we're missing.
No, the answer is absolutely not.
The temple. No?
Absolutely not. Nothing will reveal it to you unless you reveal it to yourself through your Avodah. It's Avodah Hashem that reveals it. You're not going to be able to find any tricks. It won't be a Beis Hamikdash. It won't be a microscope. It won't be anything. I just asked you about love. Let's not talk about Atzmus. Is there any tool that in the world that is going to allow you to see love? Who says you have to see it? Why are you worshiping human tools? Who says there are things that need to be measured and seen under a microscope? You're making it sound like until we don't find a tool to be able to see it, who said that? Maybe you have to ask yourself whether these—
I'm saying the Chassidus.
You'll never find. I don't want a tool to see love. Love should always— one second. You asked me a question. I'm trying to answer. Okay. I don't need a tool to see love. I'm not looking for a tool to see love. There's things that you have to suspend your tools to be able to experience. You have to suspend these tools. So the goal is use your tools as far as you can go. That's called mamata l'maylo, mamala kalalman, sevev, Atzmus, Nitfes, murgish, muskel, etc., etc. And then you'll discover things that you'll realize you don't need the tools that you had when you were a child. Just like when you teach a child, you give a mashal, an example. some point, the child will grow up and won't need the mashal. They won't say, give me a new mashal. You won't need the mashal. They'll understand the nimshal. Chassidus is Torah. Torah reveals to us what God wants to reveal to us. So obviously, a lot of what we're saying here is because God told us this. How does the Rebbe Rashab know this? How does the Alter Rebbe know? Because Ata Haresul Ladas, that God revealed himself. But for us to appreciate it, that's going to take the hard work of us integrating it. You could be told a lot of things. We're told here things about Atzmus that can take a lifetime to really fully internalize. But so we're told, and now we have to do our work to appreciate it. No shortcuts. What should I tell you?
I think it could help. It says by Mishpotim, one side say, if the Torah wouldn't give it to us, we would learn sneers from a cat and so on. On the other side, it says, Hukim we don't understand. But Mishpotim, it says, the Eibishter did us a chesed. He did us a favor. He gave us a little face to, you think you understand, but it's way, way more than this. Once you realize that, so you're not kidding yourself, oh, I understand. As much as you understand nothing compared to what it really is. Same thing with Chassidus. Before Chassidus, we knew nothing about it. The Eibishter did a chesed with us in our generation, the previous generations, the last 300 years, that he started revealing Chassidus. Before that, they didn't have it. And he's giving us a little taste. The Rebbe Rashab gave us a little more in writing the taste. So we could get a little bit, but you're so far away from it, from the real. If you think yourself you could understand the real, start from the beginning.
Well, a big theme in Ayin Beis, I pointed out, in the Chassidus in general, is that seichel is not seichel. Seichel is God's way of taking tainug and giving us something to be able to hold on to it. In other words, we think seichel is our most superior faculty, and we use our seichel to understand. Seichel is God's way of saying, I'll allow you a tool, a bridge, to transcend your subjective emotions and to go into a reflective, objective mind so you can be able to imagine, to be able to envision something outside of your own reality. So seichel is really God's way of allowing the superconscious and realities that are completely not defined by seichel to come into our existence. The bridge between subjective human emotions and a God that is, and godliness that's completely beyond seichel altogether. So that itself is a big part of Ayin Beis is that. I think if you don't come to understand what I just said right now, which is literally hundreds of pages probably in Ayin Beis and other parts of Chassidus, you're never going to, what we're learning now is, to me, is a prerequisite first to understand what I just said about conscious and superconscious. You have to first realize that consciousness is very limited, but it is ultimately defines who we are in a structured way. That's why it's so critical to go through the steps. There's no way you can go into the world beyond superconscious if you don't first go to this conscious, to the superconscious. Chachma to the lower levels of Keser, higher levels of Keser, then you go higher, and so on. I think the problem here is, and this is the challenge, I should say, is we are learning things that are probably beyond the scope of some of us here. Because we haven't yet mastered lower levels. It's like going into a class, studying calculus, and you didn't first learn basic addition and subtraction. This is not a, hope you don't take this I'm not saying in a condescending way or a negative way, but that's where we are. We're learning the highest level right now. This is the highest levels of Chassidus. You're not going to find much higher than this anywhere. And have you really mastered the basic addition and subtraction and multiplication and division, before you get to algebra and geometry and trigonometry and calculus and so on. So that's I think one of the issues here. And you're trying to use the tools of what you have right now to try to appreciate things that are completely beyond. So the only way I could say is read it as many times as you can, try to understand it as best as you can, and then ask the questions, because I hesitate to say this, but we're not in the same league here, to be very honest. I've done this for many years, and I'm not saying this in any, God forbid, in any arrogant way. But I hear from the questions. I feel I could answer. I could say another answer, but I see you keep going back to certain things. To me, it's clear that there's certain steps that you haven't yet achieved. And I'm saying not to you, Eliezer, I'm saying it to all of us here. I'm in the same way relative to levels I have not yet reached. Is that valid, you think, in any way?
Well, it certainly will add to my Shabbos where I think about what you just said. That's for sure.
But I know, but I hope it's taken the right way.
I don't know if, when I was saying Chassidus is a tool by which we can reach levels of understanding of godliness that never existed before, I don't know why you objected to that perspective.
I objected to what level you and I and others have of understanding Chassidus. That's what I'm talking about. Now, the Chassidus can teach it. Chassidus does teach it. The Rebbe Rashab is saying it. But you're trying to understand what he's saying with tools that you did not yet integrate all the Chassidus to be able to understand this Chassidus. That's what I said. I'm talking about us, not about Chassidus. Chassidus, of course, is trying to teach us this. But it's like, again, like I mentioned with mathematics, in Chassidus, there's Aleph Beis of Chassidus, and then there's deeper Maimarim and deeper. There's levels of Chassidus itself. But even just because it says in Chassidus does not mean you're there. You still need your work to understand what it says in Chassidus. I mean, I'm sure you agree that two people, one person who's learned Chassidus, let's say his whole lifetime, and a person who's the first time reading a Maimer, are not going to have the same understanding and appreciation of the same idea, correct?
Definitely.
So that's what I was talking about. I'm not talking about Chassidus in general revealing. That's what we are learning. This is what we're learning here. The question is understanding it and relating to it. Okay, well, I think it's a valuable conversation we're having here.
Eliezer, in your defense, I forgot the name of the Tana. He learned Talmud Bavli, and he wanted to learn Talmud Yerushalmi. He had to fast for 40 days. He had to forget. Why? Why forget? Because he had to switch his way of thinking. So when somebody went to college for many years, and then he started learning Hasidus, it's one way of thinking. Somebody went to Cheder, he never went to college, and he was trained a certain way of thinking. He's changed it's a different tool to change. It's very hard to come from college and change your way of thinking.
Yeah, but I think it's getting a little too. I'm not really taking it. I'm taking a little more with a grain of salt than what I expected, because I have been learning Chassidus for 40 years, and I have learned from 8 years with Rabbi Jacobs, who's an amazing teacher, and diligently. And so I don't think that I'm that far off in my understandings of things that I don't have a comprehension that I've got to I didn't learn.
But with all respect,
I don't know the question. I don't know the question that I said or the statement that said that came to you. But my understanding is so far off. I don't know what I said today that was so far off.
I'll tell you exactly what you said. As soon as you said we need to have better tools, and you're asking what those tools are, to me, that's the question of a novice. It's like there are no tools, and that's it. And that to me is like a given. As soon as you said that right away tells me that you really think that we need tools to be able to.
But I'm saying Chassidus is the tool. My understanding of godliness.
No, your Avodah is the tool. Chassidus is a book.
But my Avodah has to be directed through Torah. Torah tells me how to do my Avodah.
Okay.
Chassidus tells me how to approach the whole subject.
But you're trying to fit Atzmus into your seichel. That's mostly a summation of what I'm hearing here.
It's not true. That part is not true. I don't try to. I understand that Atzmus is a buzz.
Your questions to me consistently keep trying to do that. Sounds to me that way.
I mean, I understand that godliness, especially Atzmus, the subject we've been learning, especially recently, is l'mayla meseichel lagamre. You can't apply the logic, the rules of logic and seichel to Atzmus. I understand that, and that's why. But yet we do have revelations, which I would call nevuah, from the Rebbeim that bring us they're teaching us that, which is they're revealing these truths. And I don't know if it's true, or you could comment on that. If their knowledge, Ayin Beis, is a result of their milamata lamila, or they've been able to reveal, like Moshe Rabbeinu revealed nevuahs, which came milamayla lamata. it would seems to me that everything I was experiencing in Ayin Beis and deeper Hasidus is revelation milamayla lamata that can only come through a Rebbe, a tzaddik gamor, somebody that has access to levels above seichel, and I'm trying to understand that within seichel, and I clearly understand that it's coming from much higher levels that I'm never able to reach because I'm not at that level.
Well, I would say the following.
Is it true that what we learn in Chassidus Ayin Beis is a revelation milamayla maseichel? That's more like in the classification of nevuah.
I'm not sure how that's relevant. I'm not sure how that's relevant here. But a few things I'll say is, number one, nevuah, generally speaking, is not something that we could really internalize. It's like a miracle, and it's not really the seder of avodah. When Nigla Anich, especially in Nigla, talks about that even the things that were said in the form of nevuah are not the way Torah works. Torah comes through Chacham and not through nevuah. And Chacham adov b'navi. Navi is like a miracle. From time to time, you need a revelation. Chacham is the big issue. God revealed it through Chacham. So that's number one. Number two, if you talk about nevuah, then to me the whole thing is then it's a whole different thing. Nevuah would be the Rebbe Rasha predicting what's going to be. This is all islapshus in seichel. Even if you want to call it nevuah, it's completely islapshus in Chabad in a way that we can understand. So I'm not sure. Just to me, it confuses the issues here. The point is, let's go back to the main topic. The way you're phrasing your questions and the way you are unable to, or you're saying not really able to wrap your head around it, to me, I'm responding that as much as I can say, I think it's going to take your own effort and your own work until you work it out. Just like certain things you cannot convey until you do that. Now, you could say, and I'm more than happy you learned Chassidus 40 years, and I'm sure that you are not a beginner, but still, you haven't reached the destination yet, like nobody has. I haven't either. So that's my advice, is to read it, learn it again, look inside, see the language, try to absorb it, try to suspend your logical prior pre-programmed way of thinking to how the Rebbe is trying to explain it. And I really believe you'll ultimately get more and more of it until you get a lot. I don't know if all of it, but at least that's my suggestion.
Okay, taken.
I have said what I could say. I don't know what more I can say. I think I've tried to explain it the best as I can, but it's how I understand it. So what should I say? And I say again, I hope you not take offense to what I said. I just trying to explain, contextualize. Anybody else wants to weigh in on this important conversation? Okay. So we'll stop here. We just reviewed more. We still have to do one little sif. And I do maybe want to go back to the beginning. Let me ask you, Rabbi Eliezer. You there?
Yeah, sure. I'm listening.
If you really want to get this and you really want to understand it, why don't you read from the beginning of this Sikha in Toras Sholom? Why don't you go to the Maimorim I mentioned to you? It's not a demand. I'm just asking. If you really want to get to the bottom of it, why don't you learn it like you would learn anything thoroughly from beginning to end? I mean, I'm explaining. I'm the teacher here, but there are sources. Go back to the sources. You could dismiss even anything I've said. Just read inside all these places and really struggle. I'm not saying I don't know what kind of time you have, but if you really want to get to the bottom of it, that's what you need to do. You have to learn it back and read it again, read it again, read it again. That I don't know if there's any way around that.
Quite honestly, it's been coming together much more than it came out today. For me personally, understanding of what we've gone through. I mean, I've had a lot of personal transformations, especially volume 3, and understanding what Atzmus and our relationship and all this, and transforming the Tzimtzum and all these things. So I went, for example, I went to Shmos yesterday because you told me about Shmos volume 6, and That's in Yiddish, right? I was wondering, I was trying to find if there would be I could do the Yiddish, but it's
probably, no, everything has been translated into Hebrew.
So I went to Toras Sholom. That volume 6 says that it was from Tafshin Lamed. That second Sikha in Shmos, right? It's Shmos, second Sikha, says it was Tafshin Lamed. And I went over there and I couldn't find it in Toras Menachem, the Hebrew one. I thought it would be easier for me.
No, but there's a translation of the Likutei Sichos in Hebrew, and probably that Sikha has also been translated into English.
I'm sorry interrupting. I looked for that yesterday. It's so fascinating. Behind fascinating. So powerful.
What did you look at in volume 6? In the Yiddish, right?
Volume 6 in Shmois. You see it right away.
Second Sikha, about Avonim and Levanim. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But then in one place, at the end of that Sikha, it says that it's Mesichos Shabbos Parshas Balak.
Tavshin Chav Daled.
Right. The Shabbos Parshas Shmos Tavshin Chav Vav. And when I went over
you can't go to Toras Menachem. You have to look at that Sikha, the way it was.
That's it. Okay.
Toras Menachem is the original Sikha as it was said. It's specifically Chelik Vav, and there are translations of the whole Likutei Sichos in Hebrew. You don't have it?
Yeah, I mean, which Toras Menachem is, no?
No, Toras Menachem is the Farbrengens, not the Likutei Sichos.
What? So which volumes of the Likutei Sichos in Hebrew?
Same thing. Volume 6, Sikha 2 in Hebrew. You have to find the Hebrew translation of that Sikha.
There's a set of all Likutei Sichos in just Hebrew?
I believe so.
I didn't know that.
I'm almost sure. Am I wrong? That I'm almost positive there is.
I don't. Any of you guys know about that on
Yes. As a matter of fact, in the Dvar Malchus, they print every week a Sikha, and this is the original Sikha, which was in Yiddish in Likutei Sichos, and it was translated into Hebrew. Like I'm looking now in the Dvar Malchus, Parshas Lech Lecho Krach Tesvov Sikha Hey.
There you go.
The original is in Yiddish. Here it's in Hebrew.
But Dvar Malchus, those a set of volumes.
No, Dvar Malchus is the weekly magazine that they put together.
I'm asking if
there's a Likutei Sichos in Hebrew. Ask Kahos.
Okay.
There's a whole set of Likutei Sichos in Hebrew.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll stop here. We'll call this up.
Let me ask a question. Exist translation of this Sikha in English?
I think so. There is. I think you have to ask Sichos in English. I'm almost sure it is, because it's considered one of the most fundamental Sichos of the Rebbe. So I think it was translated. Okay, so we'll see this as a general overview and review, and we'll continue Sunday. So let me stop here the recording. Toras Sholom.